Hello and welcome to another video. In this one today, we're going on a fun little day trip. We're going to go to Logan, Utah, or that area, to visit a ranch and go sledding with some relatives. We're done charging. I told the car to schedule charging, schedule departure, and it's showing that we're up to 255 miles right now. So we're gonna go get the kids loaded up and we'll get on the road. Where we're headed to is this place right here called Hardware Ranch up in the Logan, Utah area. And so I can pull this up on my phone. I can push this share button over here that's on the right side, if you can see that. And then I'll switch all the way over here to the Tesla app, which is right there. And then it says sharing, sent, and then right up here already it popped up on the car and has the turn-by-turn navigation to there. It's showing that we will arrive with 34% battery, and then we will have to charge potentially here at this Salt Lake City supercharger on the way back. My plan is to charge at a relative's house while we're up there visiting as well as part of this trip. So I'm not too concerned about charging, but we'll see how it goes. This right here is the trip graph, and so you can see it's showing 99% right now. I told it to go to 100% and it stopped at 99, or maybe it got to 100 and has come back down. I'm not sure. Are you excited?
Yeah.
Yeah? How excited? Before plugging here at our friend's house, I have routed us back home, and you can see here that it says stay below 75 to reach your destination, and that it's having us go to the Salt Lake supercharger and would be getting there at 5%. We intend to charge here for a bit, and worst case scenario, I can route us to this Tremont supercharger that's right up here, if you can see there. We've gotten to our friend's house, and I wanted to plug in to see how much charge we could get while we're here, to see if we can avoid going to the Tremont supercharger. And so I've got our extension cord in the frunk and some adapters. I already investigated, and they have a dryer outlet available to us. They have the NEMA 1430, which is this one right here. And so I'm going to go get this plugged in, and we'll see how it goes. Here's the electrical panel for the house, and you can see here it says dryer, so circuits 2 and 4, or slots 2 and 4 are taken up by the dryer. We can look over here and see 2 and 4, and so this is the double pole breaker, and it says 30 right there. So that's how you know to make sure that the circuit you're plugging your Tesla into has enough amperage. In our case, what I did is manually change the amperage down to 24 amps, because that's 80% of a 30 amp circuit, and I want to make sure and not to trip the breaker. I plugged in my extension cord here to their dryer outlet in their house, which is a NEMA 1430. Here's the Tesla EVSE. You can see there's a green light showing that it's ready to go. And here is the cord all the way out into the driveway. So I'm going to plug in, see how this goes. Perfect, it's charging. Let's see how well it's going. All right, it is going to ramp up still. You can see I turned it down to 24 amps because this is a 30 amp circuit. We'll see how that goes. Okay, it's ramped up to 24 amps. You can see at this rate it would take 8 hours to get to 100%. We only intend to be here for a little while though, but we'll get as much electricity as we can. And our intention is to avoid having to go to the Tremont Supercharger, which is up here, and we want to be able to just go straight down to the Salt Lake Supercharger. And right now we have some more driving to do today, and the Salt Lake Supercharger is showing arrival at 6%. So we'll get what we can and we'll continue on our way. Arrived at Hardware Ranch. You can see we have no cellular data, and so this is what the Tesla screen looks like when the map can't load. Very pixelated. We have arrived with 133 rated miles, or 43 degrees Fahrenheit, and if we switch over to energy, then we're at 52% battery. And straight up that way is a whole herd of elk. The line of people waiting to go on rides is a lot more significant than we expected. They have a big board here full of information about elk so that we can read up about them while we're waiting in line. And the real elk that we're going to see are right over there in the distance.
In spring, their antlers fall off, and then they start to grow new ones. And then in the summer, they grow them.
Lucy, are you dancing? Hey Lydia. Are you having fun? Lucy, are you excited? How excited are you? So excited. Oh! Girls, what are you looking at?
Elk.
Elk?
And then some have horns.
Some do.
Just under 700. Still. Yeah, hasn't changed.
And then they say, don't worry, humans grow back.
Their horns grow back? Yeah?
That what we heard on Lexia.
You heard on Lexia that their horns grow back? I think you're right.
What's saying that noise?
That baby lost its
It's
mom.
just my luck. I always get stuck between the cow and the calf. Just my luck.
We're back in the car after our adventure. You can see here in front of us the ride that we just went on and all of the elk out there. What did you think, girls? It was good? Great? Lots of fun? Did you like it, Clara? Great. So the plan is now, we look here, we have 132 rated miles of range, but we don't have any cell reception. So we're basically just going to drive back out of the canyon, and once we get reception again, then we'll route ourselves to the Salt Lake City, Utah supercharger and see what our arrival or estimated arrival percentage will be. If it's too low, then we'll stop back at our friend's house and we'll charge enough to get to Salt Lake. If we have enough charge, then we'll just head on down to that supercharger, charge up enough to get home. And so we'll see how it goes. We got into reception, we checked our route back home, and it had us stopping in the Salt Lake City supercharger and getting there with 7% battery. That's doable. We were about to just do it, but then we decided to just come and visit with our friends longer. And so we came back here to our friend's house and went ahead and plugged in. We've been here for a little bit. I don't really even know how long we've been here, but we're charging at 18 miles per hour or 6 kilowatts. That's 24 amps. And you can see up here that it is estimating 11% arrival at the Salt Lake City supercharger. and it is 38 degrees outside. So we're going to keep visiting as long as we care to, and then we're now ready to go, and the car is ready to go. Worst case scenario, if we hadn't been able to charge here, we would have just gone to the Logan Utah supercharger. It would have been out of the way, however, which isn't ideal. So we're glad that we could charge here, and it saved us up to half an hour. I'm not really sure. I'll look it up when I get home what we saved by not having to go to the Tremont supercharger. But in any case, in the wintertime, it is not doable in this car to go from our home to Logan and then all the way back to the Salt Lake supercharger, which we did successfully back in the summer. But in the winter, because of the lower efficiency, heating the cabin, etc., it turned out to not be doable for us, which I suspected it wouldn't be. But we made it work, and we were able to charge here, so it's convenient. So I think it's a good idea to keep an extension cord and adapters on hand so that you can take advantage of electricity in various locations as you go about. And of course, that depends on the willingness of the people you're visiting. Beautiful sunset. The car is estimating arriving at the Salt Lake supercharger at 16%, so we stayed here a little bit longer. And so we're gonna get on the road. Are you excited, girls?
Yeah!
We're approaching the Salt Lake City, Utah supercharger right there. You can see it's a little bumpy. And it turns out that we've driven economically enough that it's saying we can actually get home with 4% battery. So we're just gonna go for it. And we'll be able to save some time rather than having to stop at the supercharger for a couple of minutes. We're just about to arrive home in half a mile, and we are arriving with, well, we're 5% battery right now, but it is arriving with 4% battery. It was saying 5% for a long time, but I did a couple of little bit harder accelerations and it took off the little edge that it had, so we're now arriving with 4%. So that's great. We ended up being able to save a bit of time. Every time you stop at a supercharger, it always takes some time to navigate to it and plug in, etc. So we saved ourselves that time. We're home. It was a fun day trip, and the car performed well. Obviously, in the future, when we have the Cybertruck and we're able to drive somewhere around closer to 500 miles on a full charge, we would be able to go to Logan and back in a day without plugging in at all and still have plenty of battery to spare. But for right now, having this car that we have, we were able to make it work and charge at our friend's house, and no problem. Didn't have to stop at a supercharger, actually. Obviously, we would have had to if we didn't plug in at our friend's house. But I would say the concessions that we made having to do that were well worth it, because I love driving this car. That being said, it's not for everyone. I recognize that, and there are going to be people out there that won't want to buy a Tesla because they can't do their 2 or 3 hour road trip in one day without having to plug in somewhere, and they don't want to be inconvenienced by that. But I feel like that's the anomaly for us. We don't do trips like this terribly often, maybe once a month at the most. And the normal daily living and driving around in this car is just such a pleasure. Being able to have it be charged up to 80 or 90% every night, and we have hundreds of miles to work with. In the wintertime, definitely I've been finding the efficiency to be closer to 75 or maybe 80%. And so with that, our range is closer to 200, maybe even slightly less than that on really cold days. But our normal living is not even nearly that. I mean, sometimes we don't drive at all in a day. At least this car doesn't get driven. And sometimes neither of our cars get driven, because sometimes I work from home, and Jessica doesn't have anywhere she has to go every day. So in any case, I would say this trip was fun. We were able to visit with our friends, and we were able to do it at almost no cost. A little bit of electricity, but other than that, it was great, and the kids had fun. We made lots of memories. And so I hope you enjoyed this video, seeing what it was more like to do a day trip rather than a multi-staged road trip. This is just out and then back home at the end of the day. We ended up using up the entire battery pretty much. We got home with 4% here, and that's with having charged for a bit today. And I'll go over the TeslaFi stats with you so that you can see the details. And so here are all of the details. For those of you who are not familiar with TeslaFi, it is an online service that you have to pay for. It costs $5 a month, and it will connect to your Tesla account and download all of the usage data that your car is generating as you drive it around. And so this is the TeslaFi data for our drive there up to Logan. It shows you a bunch of information about the weather and whatnot, addresses you drove to. In our case, we drove for 1 hour and 36 minutes to get up there. We drove for 110 miles, but we actually used up 136 rated miles because of the inefficiencies of the weather, the heating the cabin and whatnot. You can see here we had 80% efficiency. We had the inside cabin set to 72 degrees and it was 38 degrees outside, just to give you an idea of what you might expect there from the cabin heating inefficiencies, as well as strictly when you're just driving 80 miles an hour on the freeway, you're not going to get the rated range, which is 300 watt hours per mile, and we were driving at 380 watt hours per mile. All right, so down here, let's zoom out just a little bit. When we got to our friend's house, we charged. And I plugged in for just 2 minutes and then plugged in again for 51 minutes. And keep in mind, this was at 24 amps and 240 volts, which is what it tells us right over here, the voltage and the amperage. But being plugged in for 53 minutes, we basically went up 6%. So it gives you an idea of what you can expect out of a dryer outlet and how long that takes. Now, I had never planned on getting fully charged at our friend's house. I was just doing this to see what I could do, see what's possible as an experiment. If we had stayed there plugged in to get back to 100%, it would have taken 1 hour and 15 minutes estimated by the car. So then we drove somewhere in town briefly, and that's not really that important. We only drove for 2 minutes, and then we drove 3 minutes to come back home. Then when I got back to their house, we were still going to be there for a little while, so I plugged back in and charged for another hour and a half. So finally we were at 61% battery by the time I unplugged, and we actually drove to Hardware Ranch at that point. Now, this is the segment where we drove to Hardware Ranch, and it shows that we were driving for 3 hours and 12 minutes. That's not correct. Basically, we went up into the mountains, lost cellular connectivity, and the car had no idea what we were doing for however long we were there at Hardware Ranch, which was several hours. We then got back to our friend's house and charged for another hour and 21 minutes while we were there, still visiting with them. We got up to 56% on the battery, and then we packed up our charging cord and headed home. And so this is the drive segment going from their house home. We drove for 1 hour and 38 minutes, basically just a reversal of the first drive of the day, 108, almost 9 miles, etc. The efficiency was a tiny bit better in this case, but we used almost the exact same amount of energy. If we look back at the first drive of the first day, we used up 53% of the battery. And so going to this one, coming back, we used up 51% of the battery. So we saved 2% of the battery coming back. So not fantastic, but I'll take it. We're going down in elevation, and that's probably the primary difference there. When we got back home, we plugged our car in, of course. We got back home at 4%. We charged for 6.5 hours and stopped charging at 80%. And then this is the stats of that charge at home. Now let's look at the overall stats for the whole day. We drove a total of 255 miles, and I would say that maybe that's slightly inaccurate, not driving all the way up to Hardware Ranch. We used up 310 rated miles. We drove for the day at 82% efficiency. This total time driven is not correct, so let's ignore that. It's a couple hours less than that, but I'm not sure how much. The kilowatt hours used is probably correct. That's 94 kilowatt hours. Watt hours per mile, 368. That's probably close to accurate. But probably a little bit low. Some other stats there. This is the charge that we did when we got home. So it charged 56 kilowatt hours to go from that 4% charge up to 80%. And it was 6.5 hours to do that. And then these 4 travel charges is what we did at our friend's house. So we put 20 kilowatt hours into the battery there at their house, and that's what enabled us to be able to still do this trip and not have to stop at any superchargers on the way back. But overall, the car worked just fine for us for a trip like this. And as backup, we had the superchargers at Tremont in worst case, or we also had Salt Lake that we ended up not having to use either. So we're gonna get the kids to their beds. You can see they're asleep in the back. I'm gonna go take them in, put them to bed. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope it was informative for you. If you are interested in purchasing a Tesla yourself, if you're going to buy a brand new one, feel free to use my referral code that's in the description down below. And if you have any questions, feel free to post those in the comments down below, and I'll do what I can to answer those questions. And if you would like to see further videos like this in the future, feel free to subscribe to my channel and you'll get notifications. If you click the bell icon next to the subscribe button, you'll get the notifications each time I upload a new video. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.